This is Taking Stock. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and my guest Michael Joseph, who is the chairman of Kenya Airways. Kenya Airways, 41 years old, gone through various shareholding structures, most recently in a public-private partnership. It's got private shareholders, including KLM, the Dutch airline, as a shareholder, and also, when I last checked, listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Is that pretty much the structure as it stands right now? Because these things are very, very fluid and change fast.
In the financial restructuring, which we just completed the beginning of this year, through the financial restructuring, the government has about 48% shares in Kenya Airways. The banks converted their debt into equity, and they own about 35% of Kenya Airways. KLM about 7%, and the balance is on the, as you say, on the Nairobi Stock Exchange.
Is it liquid? Does it trade much?
It trades, not a lot. It trades, but there's not enough shares on the stock at the moment because they were extremely diluted when we did the financial restructuring.
Is there a benefit to having a flag carrier, a national airline, with a public position listed on a stock exchange? It creates a level of transparency, or is it more of a distraction for you as somebody who has to manage this process?
Let me phrase it carefully. Of course, from a management point of view, from a board point of view, being a listed company brings some onerous obligations. And because of our shareholding is very, very small, it doesn't seem worth it. But it's necessary for now, and at the moment it's necessary to remain listed, because in the financial restructuring plan, the banks who came in because we converted their debt into equity have to have an exit, and their exit is via selling their shares on the stock market.
And KLM at one point had about a quarter of the shares in the company,
yeah.
And that's quite a strong strategic position for an international airline to have. What's the purpose of them retaining a 7% stake in the airline?
I think it's unfortunate that they didn't take up their rights when we did the financial restructuring for various reasons, which I don't think had anything to do with Kenya Airways, but more had to do with their own KLM Air France, not problems, because I don't think it's a problem, but I think they just decided not to take fully their rights in the financial restructuring, which I think is unfortunate. I would like them to have been back at 20-25%. But
do they have any input into the management of the business? Do they
have
a board seat?
They have a board seat. They have a board seat, and we look to them very, for strategic advice. But we also, as you know, we have a joint venture with them, with KLM Air France in flying to Europe, which is extremely valuable to us. So that's why I think it's important for us to retain them as a shareholder as well.
That creates the hub opportunity that Africa needs in this huge confluence. I mean, Dubai and the Middle East, all of those airlines have got great hubs, and they've spent billions and billions on creating extraordinary airports. And for Africa really to compete against those airlines, you've got to have strong positions.
Yeah, really.
Collaboration between Ethiopia and Kenya rather than going head to head?
Look, at the moment, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, there is, of course, we talk to each other, but we are obviously competitors with each other at the moment. But I think who knows what might happen in the future. I wouldn't rule anything out in this, from what I've seen from this industry. I think more. I think is we need to transform our airline into a profitable business before we start talking on an equal terms with an Ethiopian.
Are you going to beat SAA to becoming profitable? Vuyani Jagana, who you know, also an ex-telecoms chief executive, hence my jibe at the beginning about what you know as a telecoms executive about airlines. But Vuyani, you worked with him via Vodacom and Vodafone, and there's a connection there, and he's now CEO of SAA. He needs 21.7 billion rands of South African taxpayers' money to drive his turnaround process, which he says will deliver a profit in 2021. Would you beat him?
We will probably beat him without having state aid, with no state input in terms of money. The way and why we did this restructure, we did this partnership with JKIA, that we did that in a way that we can rebuild the airline, become more profitable without state input. And that was one of the primary reasons why we did it that way.
Explain to me how the ownership of the airport relates to your being able to be profitable without you becoming a monopoly that excludes your competitors.
Sure. So JKIA belongs to Kenya Airports Authority, KAA. So there's a whole, it's just like the Airports Authority here. Sure. You own all the airports. So what we are doing is we're doing a public-private partnership with KAA and to run and operate JKIA. JKIA on its own, on a standalone basis, is a profitable business. Could be more profitable. That's why I'm saying we're not going to be, we want to encourage more flights into JKIA because we want to be more profitable. But from a financial point of view, it gives us the basis when you combine KQ and the two together, and the efficiencies in terms of what we can do at the airport, in terms of ground handling, catering, maintenance, all these things, we can create a much stronger unit and much more financially sound unit without looking for state aid, which I think is really important. So this is where we see it going. So it's a PPP for 30 years. We haven't finalized the deal. I have to tell you that we haven't signed a deal yet. We will pay them a concession fee, which will allow them to continue to operate their remaining airports. Because of course the JKA is the funder of all the remaining airports, and this is how we plan to structure it.
Now, Kenya Airways was the first African airline to be privatized, 1996.
Yes.
By then it was 20 odd years old. Full privatization didn't work. So you've gone back to this model of public-private partnerships. South Africa is exploring the idea of public-private partnerships, but like Kenya Airways, needs to get to profitability before there's an asset of value worth selling. Explain to me the benefits of the public-private partnership versus full state ownership versus full private airline.
Look, I think if we had the option when before we did the financial restructuring, we were looking at what are our options. Renationalize the airline, sell it off to somebody else, or do the financial restructuring. I think our option was to remain as a privately owned airline for the benefits that we could have, that we can see from a longer term basis, where we could probably encourage private participation, other investors to come into Kenya Airways. And also, when you become a state-owned entity, it comes with lots and lots of restrictions and oversight, which makes you less efficient. So that's why we opted to remain as we are, or as we are today. So it gives us more flexibility. It gives us the opportunity to grow, and also the opportunity to invite maybe private investors in the future.
What strikes me as odd about African airlines at the moment is the number of expatriates from all over the world who are involved in turnaround processes at these flag-carrying airlines. The logic of that, your chief executive, for example, is a Polish national who previously ran the Polish airline LOT.
Yes. I think, not to malign or to say anything negative about anybody, but you know, as we were talking about before we started the interview, running an airline is extremely complicated. It's a complicated business. It's not simple as it seems from the outside. Huge complication, the network effects, the planning your routes, buying your aircraft, maintenance and all these. It's very complicated. And you really need an experienced airline executive to turn it around and to operate it. You really absolutely must have that. One of the conditions for taking this job, when I was asked by the government to take on the role as chairman, was I want to be able to choose the top management team, and from wherever they may come. And I'm choosing and finding, you know, people with airline expertise, because you absolutely have to have that. I think this is the mistake we made in the beginning, is that we didn't see that as clearly as we now see it. And I think you're seeing the same thing with South African Airways.
We certainly have experienced that over the last decade or so. Michael Joseph is the chairman of Kenya Airways. More with him in just a moment.